Business Week here on Arise News. I'm joined now by Adenike Onasoga, Head of Supply Chain Africa at Twinnings Ovaltine, to review some of our top stories in more detail. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Adenike, great to have you. So we want to start with AGOA. AGOA has been around for like 25 years.
Correct.
You know, it is meant to give African exporters access to the U.S. market. Now, the African exporters are saying the U.S. government should extend the timeline for the end of it. Is this realistic, given we know the U.S. government stands on trade globally?
I think it's a right step in the right direction in the sense that, you know, AGOA has really helped the African manufacturers for the last 25 years. However, what we see is that we need to start having the right conversations around what can we do to hedge this, just in case there's a risk of non-extensions. The conversations have started in Washington. Some countries like Kenya have begun to have the conversation. But ultimately, we need to ensure that we are hedging this. So that goes back to the conversation around how do we strengthen our inter-African trade?
Absolutely.
How do we ensure that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement begins to work? High adoption rate, yes, but what does that mean in terms of execution? What we see is that there's a huge regulatory challenge that does not allow a lot of people to adopt it. I've spoken to some businesses who are still waiting for their licenses 6 months, 1 year.
This is under AFTA.
Under AFTA. So
Right.
I think that, you know, just to ensure that we edge, you know, the risk of, you know, not the extension not coming through, because we know that the impact is going to be on what the impact will be on jobs, the impact will be on, you know, foreign exchange, and also for the countries as well. And I think as well, it also allows Nigeria to begin to look at diversification of its, you know, export portfolio very, very critically, because even though it's number 2, you know, a large chunk of what it has been exporting for the last 25 years is oil, about 80 to 90%, unlike countries like South Africa, Kenya, and even small countries like Lesotho. So I think that these are the times we need to start accelerating those conversations around diversification.
Absolutely.
And one last thing is around, we need to also start looking at, you know, supporting manufacturing and not just, you know, talking about it, you know, but putting the right actions in place to support manufacturing.
I mean,
locally.
you know, it's even incredible that this AGOA Act has been in place for so long. Has the benefit mostly been for agricultural products or a suite of different products? It's
been across. So we've seen even South Africa goes as far as automobiles, automobiles transportation, you know, services, some you know, automobiles around that sector, and Kenya apparels, you know, we've seen, of course, commodities. Nigeria has also
Nigeria benefited from non-oil export commodities.
Just a little.
Just a little.
I think they got their act together, but very late.
Very late.
But so this is an opportunity to ensure that we begin to
indeed, because I always used to sort of hear a lot more about the East African countries under AGOA, but interesting times. Still on world trade, we're seeing news about AI expected to contribute some 40% to global trade by the year 2040. How exactly will this happen? Like, how is AI driving that volume of trade?
Yeah, so technology is the future. Everybody's talking about technology right now. Every sector has to be ensure that they are future ready. You know, and that's the role that technology plays. But in terms of how that will play out, would then be in terms of the investment that we've made from our supply chains, infrastructure, the technology, you know, both the software and the hardware, and then how that plays in terms of our processes as well. I think for us that would be the challenge. And I think Okonjo-Iweala just said it very, very nicely. He said there has to be a nice balance to ensure that trade happens seamlessly. So Africa needs to put its act together. Nigeria needs to put its act together in that regard.
Yeah, and you know, you're a supply chain specialist. Are you seeing specific use cases of how AI is driving growth in the supply chain, whether in Nigeria or elsewhere?
Absolutely. Supply chain cuts across and is definitely engine for driving growth. And I think for us, in terms of what that will look like in terms of implementation is, you know, being able to predict what your delays will look like, being able to predict what your transit time will look like, being able to ensure that you can, you know, do trade more securely through even not just AI, even cybersecurity and blockchains and all that. So I think that, you know, it cuts across, and supply chain definitely will benefit from.
You know, the next story about the F.O.B, the government's decision to sort of suspend the controversial 4% F.O.B charge on imported goods. I mean, I guess my perspective is that if they were able to suspend it, was it necessary to impose it in the first place? And aren't these the sorts of issues that really hamper trade? Tell us about the initial rationale, and maybe explain a bit about what the F.O.B means in terms of export and import of goods.
So it's actually free on board. It's a part of your freight cost that you are expected to free on board. It's a part of your freight cost you're expected to pay, right? And which then, of course, will increase your import costs drastically. But what government had the right intentions, because at the end of the day, they're also trying to improve or increase the non-oil sectors in terms
revenue.
of revenue,
yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
And they also want to discourage import as much as possible by encouraging local manufacturers. However, what we see is that they have put the cart before the horse, because what they should have done was ensure that they bring the players into the conversation, and ensure they're having a dialogue. This definitely is not something that will be solved by just imposing a levy. We need to peel back a lot of layers, And MAN has done the right thing by calling out a couple of things, because a lot of the manufacturers in Nigeria currently today have a high raw material, cost, right? About 6.6 trillion, like they've called out, and Naira, yes. And then even the ones that, source locally, they source from suppliers who import.
Yeah.
So there's still a huge import. So at the end of the day, it's, counterproductive, but it's the right conversation that we need to have, but it has to happen in layers with the right collaboration in place as well.
Yeah. So, I thought it was really interesting that one of the stories you wanted to focus on was the cybersecurity issue, especially for banks. There we lost transactions last year to the tune of something like 54 trillion naira worth of cybersecurity fraud. I mean, this issue seems to be a recurring issue. How can we really curb it? And is there a particular economic trend that's even helping to increase the rate of cybersecurity fraud that we're seeing?
So I think that with technology comes its own risk, right? And these are the things that we need to plan for. Unfortunately, Africa does not have the opportunity to be behind, when it comes to cybersecurity or technology, as the case may be. Then it has to be a focus to leapfrog and intentionality to leapfrog on this as well. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is the fact that, we are looking at it in the financial sector, but then there's risk in other sectors as well that we need to start focusing on. And EFCC already has about 6 banks that are currently investigating as a result of this. So investment has started, and then more investment needs to come into place to ensure that we are able to curb this as much as possible. But then it comes with the territory.
Yeah, indeed, it certainly comes with the territory. And we talk about AI and technology adoption. The more we see growth in that area, the more it increases risk and exposure. Hopefully, we have more fraud experts as those industries also grow. Finally, Dangote Refinery exporting its first shipment of petroleum to the U.S. Global traders obviously getting in on the action. How significant is this? We talk about non-oil exports, but here is a major breakthrough in refined oil export.
Exactly. I think it's a major breakthrough in several regards. First, foreign exchange, the fact that we can get revenue from it. But more importantly is the fact that, first of all, the quality. There's some, credibility that now comes with the fact that we can export good crude oil into the US, right? And so that the product quality is there. And also, it also helps Dangote in terms of efficiency. They're currently at, about 65 to 70% efficiency. So that means that can boost up the efficiency of the refinery for Dangote. But more importantly is that we need to pay attention to the fact that as much as we want to, push out semi-finished goods or finished goods, there's a risk, especially for Dangote, where he's talking about the local crude oil not being enough. So we might see some level of imbalance where he's importing from the US, and he has talked about it, importing raw crude oil from the US and then exporting finished goods. So we need to ensure that we are paying attention to that as well. Right?
Indeed, and it was opposite problem Nigeria had, because Nigeria was exporting crude oil and importing refined products. So Dangote is like a country in and of himself. Anyway, thanks so much for being with us, Adenike Onasoga. Great to have your insights on the show, and hope to have you back soon.
Thank you.